practices where you'll get 3 quick tips, 2 resources, and a weekly challenge related to today. We're going to be talking about student-to-student collaboration, student-to-student conversations, some things that we can do to get kids working with kids from anywhere in the world, from any locations. I'm Greg Zorbas from Inspired Classroom, your host, and we're going to get started.
Great. Hi, Greg. Good to see you again. It's always fun to kind of get together and chat about this stuff. And we've had a great week this week, right? In Inspired Classroom, we've been working really hard with the World Affairs Council, and they have been coordinating an Irish exchange with some students in Ireland and some students in Montana. And so this week, you guys just started facilitating conversations, and it was just a joy to be in there and watch the students get all excited and talk to each other. And, you know, the students are pretty native in some ways in globally connecting, aren't they? What's been your experience with that?
Well, you know, what was really encouraging today was this idea that we weren't doing something that was COVID related, and they weren't being forced into something. This was something that they just got to introduce each other and talk, and the smiles and the energy and the enthusiasm and the engagement was absolutely phenomenal. And as you saw, you know, and to talk to the teachers afterwards and hear that continued, and to know that they're excited to work and they're excited to do some things to prepare for the next session. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Right. And what we're talking today about is kind of an extension of what we've been talking about, I know. I think what you just said is interesting in that, you know, a lot of times people think, oh, you know, these one-off, you know, kind of one-on-one conversations, but this is more of building. What we're going to talk about today is more about building that rapport over time and getting kids to work together across distances, and on something, you know, on something productive. So let's get into some of the tips for that and maybe some of the examples.
Yeah. So the first tip goes away from actually working on something, for example, some type of curriculum or some type of scenario, some type of issue that we're trying to discuss. The first thing to build into the schedule of student-to-student collaboration, especially when you're first getting to know someone, is build some time for the kids to just get to know each other. Actually give them, you know, 10 minutes to just talk to each other and share some things. And just like they're sitting in the cafeteria or they're sitting in the hallway during break or something like that, where they get a chance to just be kids and they don't feel like they have to be working. So that would be my first tip. The second tip is to have space ahead of time where they can work collaboratively. We have space at Inspired Classroom where our Irish kids are working, but it could be Google, it could be Microsoft Teams, it could be anywhere where you actually have some space where kids have time to work when they're in their groups connected, and when they might have time at home, or they might have time on a day where you're not meeting or something like that. And one of the things we did, my colleague Rob and I up in Alaska, when we were doing this, we had a document made that our kids, if they worked individually, they would use a specific font color that they chose to use. And then when they came together as a group collaboratively, they would talk, discuss, collaborate on their whatever the questions or whatever the work that they were doing. And if they felt like as a group that they all talked about it and they felt like they wanted to change something, or they liked how it was, but they had collaborated on it, then we allowed them to change that font color to their group color. And so that gave kids an opportunity to work individually if they had time, and then come together and be prepared to work as a group. So that would be tip number 2. And then tip number 3 is to prepare ahead of time. You know, have your students be thinking about things that they're interested in knowing about. Let's say if it's kids in Montana who are meeting kids in New York, what do the kids in Montana want to know about the kids in New York? Or if it's kids in Oregon and kids in Alaska, what do the kids in Oregon want to know, and vice versa, where those things are. And if it's international, it could be anything. But so give them some time, give them some ideas, give them some time to brainstorm some things that they might think they want to know each other. So when they do get in that situation where they're, in the video conference, they have some things ahead of time that they're planned out and ready to go.
Well, I really, really like what you're saying about all of this, because I know that teachers, when technology, computers and other things first came out, it was kind of thrust upon everybody. And a lot of times what happens is you take what you were doing in the non-technological or non-virtual world, and you just kind of transfer it over to the virtual world. And I love the tip about a collaborative document, because that's going way beyond using a piece of technology like a computer or a word processor to just write an essay or come up with something. It's actually changing the way that work is done and changing the way that students have to think. And that, at this day and age in the 21st century, is really where we need to start moving in our classrooms with that technology, is beyond just the digital worksheets, or beyond the, if you could do it with paper and pencil, well, great, now you can do it with a computer. That's, I mean, obviously there's a time and a place for that, but we've got to move beyond thinking about these technology tools. And so I love combining the video conferencing with the collaborative thinking and work documents and stuff like that, because that's really where we need to be taking technology. And like I'm going to move so I can not be in the sun. There we go. And like Greg, like you and I talk a lot about, moving beyond this pandemic time period and so forth, and really thinking about how to innovate with technology in the classroom. I like that.
Kathleen, it's something that I talk about a lot too. And I know we try to downplay the idea that the things that we're doing are not COVID, not because of COVID. And we need to understand that because of COVID, the workplace has realized that people can work in different locations. But this was happening before COVID. We had a really cool session one time with a person there's actually a company out there who designs and takes on people who want to work remotely. And if you work for a company that says, yes, you can work for remotely, there's a company out there that takes you on an 8-month tour of places in the world where you work remotely, and they set everything up for you. They set up the workspace, they set up the rent places, they set up some fun activities for you to get to know people and places where you're at. So this was happening pre-COVID. And you're right, we do need to be, we're realizing, I have I know people in Nike, and we know people in many companies have not gone back to work yet. They're still working from home. So
right.
People need to understand, and our kids need to understand, we are in a changing environment as far as workspace goes.
Well, and I love that we're talking about conversations, because so much work is taking place remotely, we need to get better at getting to know people, conversing with people, having that social connection, and that the way to talk to each other over a screen. And it's never going to be as good as person to person, we know that, but over a screen, if we're working together, we've got to build some skills in our students so that they're very comfortable interacting properly, and having good etiquette, and being active listeners, like we've talked about before, and all of those things. So this continuation that we have today of talking about conversations is really good. And I know as teachers, we're like, we've got to meet the standards, and we have all of these things to do, right? We've got to cover this curriculum. But really, truly, the experiences the kids will remember are the ones where they just get to laugh and be kids. Like this week, we saw those students in Ireland and Montana talking about hey lads, what music do you listen to over there? And they'd answer, and all of the kids in both places would cheer because they're both listening to the same kind of music. And that is so cool, and it's so important.
Absolutely. And the teachers that are getting into this will realize that those standards that you mentioned, they're all being met. They just have to put them into practice. That's what we found. I mean,
right.
I was never really forced to be real into recording all the because of where I was at in Alaska teaching. I didn't have to worry about standards so much. But when we did look at standards, we always found that they're there. They're across the board. We're hitting all the standards that need to be hit. So that's a good thing. So one more thing though, tip number 4, which I think I did a week or 2 ago. And this brought me because of the COVID thing. One of my other tips is you tell the students they always have to have their cameras on, which is one of the things you were talking about, being able to converse, being able to read body language and things like that. That was one of the things that we told our students. They had to have their cameras on when they were talking to each other so that they could see each other and not, sometimes it might be awkward, especially if they're first meeting. Somebody might say something in a tone or something that somebody might take personally, but if they see the body language of the person, they might realize that it wasn't meant to be that way at all. So we always had our kids, we just had that was a rule. Cameras had to be on.
That's a really, really good point. Yeah.
Resources for this week. We've talked about the meet and greet forum before. It's a great chance to get kids talking about it. Like you said, we had kids talking about music. We had kids talking about geography. We had kids talking about even some history. Some of the kids brought some history into it. And so without even intending for that to happen, the kids do that kind of stuff. And it's a great way for them to get to know each other and meet each other in the first times. But when we move a little farther, it gives them a little background as they begin to work and stuff. They sort of know each other. And then we, of course, have also on our webpage, we have that document that talks about meeting with people from other cultures. If even in America, if West Coast and the East Coast, the Midwest and the East Coast, and especially in this environment that we're in today, there's a lot of there's some good things that can be taken from that document about meeting people from other cultures. So that's a good resource.
Yeah, and that can be found at www.inspiredclassroom.com/innovative-practices. So it's time for our weekly challenge, Greg. But I do want to shout out to a special teacher, Ryan Cooney. I'm even going to say his last name. Teaches in an alternative high school. And he was working with us this week on those student-to-student conversations and just absolutely had his kids prepped, ready to go. And the kids just pretty much took over and led the discussion. And it was just wonderful to see. And Ryan sat back and just beamed. It was awesome. But I know there's a lot of work that goes in on it on his part. So thanks, Ryan. That was great. He's an expert facilitator of those conversations and that work with kids.
Though, Kathleen, if we're going to give Ryan a shout out, which he totally deserves, we better shout out Angela too.
I agree.
The reality of that group, the kids, of course, made it happen, but the teachers initiated it. Yeah. And both teachers, you're talking about Ryan, both teachers did an outstanding job.
And Angela is in Ireland. So
yes, it was fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah, I get so used to talking to Montana, I forget that we're actually talking to the whole world on this.
Yeah.
See, I got to practice what I preach, right? And so our challenge for this week is then to what, Greg? Tell us.
Well, I think, I think it's simple. Find a place where you want to have your kids meet some other kids, and then email me. This is what I love. This is really, when it comes to, video conferencing, I'm all about bringing experts in. I'm all about all the things, but really, ultimately, I think the highest level that we can do things that we can do here are getting kids to collaborate with other kids. So I challenge you to even if you don't know where you want to go or what other kids you might want to collaborate with, I challenge you to email me and ask me and express some interest, and I'll find somebody to hook you up with.
That'd be great. That'd be so fun. I think I'd love to get a lot more classes talking. I want to let everybody know that we will be doing these now every other week. And once a month, we'll have a tech spotlight. And so our next scheduled innovative practices is going to be on March 23rd. And the tech spotlight is using Google Earth in the classroom. And we'll show you a couple examples of that. And just, you know, Greg's an amazing social studies teacher. He'll have some great ideas for, you know, using maps and all of that kind of stuff. And that particular tool, Google Earth Creator, which is an amazing tool that we use quite a bit. So we'll show that off a little bit. And of course, we'd love to hear from you, and subscribe to this channel. Follow us on Inspired Classroom in all the social media channels. And you can also schedule a call to discuss anything by getting a hold of Greg at inspiredclassroom.com. We also have a mentor meetup podcast on any of the podcast platforms. And that is talking with professionals in many different genre, and about how important it is to mentor and be mentored. So that is, you can check out Mentor Meetup. So anything else, Greg, for today?
I just can't say it enough. It's a cool thing. It really is. I know all the teachers are busy, and they, but really you can accomplish so much, and you can accomplish many of the things that you are really busy doing. You can do it with other people.
Yeah, I like that. Don't just shut your door and teach.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot harder. Reach out and collaborate. That's so much more fun. Thank you, everybody. Have a good week, and we'll talk to you on March 23rd.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.